Welcome, everybody. My name's Jennifer Griffith, and also I've got my colleague Stephanie Frisch here to talk to you today about plastics and their use in food service, and then we're going to be promoting alternatives. So welcome, everybody. We're going to have quite a few people, I believe, on the webinar today. So I will be doing questions through typing them in. So when you have a question, you don't have to wait till there's a question period. You can type it in at any point, and we'll be paying attention to the questions that come in and addressing them. We'll stop maybe, halfway through-ish, and then also at the end. So I think logistically, this presentation will be posted on the NMO website on the event page as well as the project page. We'll have more information about that later. And so a PDF of the presentation will get posted, and we are recording the webinar today as well. So it should be available to view afterwards. So again, welcome everybody, and we'll just get started here. I'm gonna present first, and then Stephanie will present later. And I'm going to turn off my camera. And Stephanie, you will let me know if the slides, you don't see them or they're not advancing or something. Great. Okay, everybody, let's get going. So first, we'll just say briefly what NMOA is, where Stephanie and I both work. It's the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan interstate association. So the solid waste programs, the hazardous waste programs, the waste site cleanup, and also the pollution prevention programs and toxics use reduction programs and things like that in the 8 Northeast states work together. So our members are those programs in Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. We were formally recognized as an interstate association by EPA in 1986, and there's more information at NMOA.org if you're interested in NMOA. We do lots of things, but we have a small grant, a USDA solid waste management program grant to focus on rural areas and low-income areas. And so the partners for this project are the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District, which is, this part of Vermont up here, the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, and then also the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation has participated, as well as the Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments in Maine, which is sort of this whole area in Maine, sort of up here. And the project is aimed at educating the public about plastic recycling. So we did some fact sheets and some public outreach that Stephanie will mention later. And then also this effort focused on food service and plastic. And there's a little disclaimer. We're not talking for the USDA. We're not talking for our states. This is Stephanie and I and our project here. So the agenda today, where are plastics used and why do we care about plastics? How plastics get into the environment and also into our bodies. Information about plastics in food service, including some ideas to reduce. Also talking a little bit more about plastic recycling, and then also talking about the resources that the project has developed, those fact sheets and the brochure. So, but in the beginning, we have poll questions. We have to do sort of before and after here. So hopefully this is fun and interesting for folks if you can answer the poll questions that Stephanie is going to launch. I guess I can't see it because I'm an organizer, I suppose, but everybody should vote for all that apply. Yeah, Stephanie, I can't see it, so you'll have to manage it.
Yes.
And when we get about 75 or 80% of people, or hopefully more, we can close the poll. and then you could show the results.
Yes,
I'm
just
trying to
waiting for
remember
a
what the
few more
questions
folks
were.
here. So this first one is, why are plastics a problem? And choosing all that apply. If we could just get a couple more people to participate, that would be great. Thank you. And then, so for our first one, we see that a lot of participants chose end up as litter and break down into microplastics, as well as entering the food chain, and that they're in our bodies and linked to health effects, as well as made from fossil fuels and chemicals.
Yes, so the only thing that really doesn't apply is that they're not inert, as we'll talk about here in a minute. Okay, so that's question one.
And then our second poll is, where do plastics in our bodies come from? Choose all that apply, please. Just giving folks a few more seconds to participate. Thank you. So looking at this one, the least chosen one is chewing on plastic pens, but overall the majority of the other answers were chosen with a high percentage. We'll talk about that more in our presentation later as well.
Yeah,
Now for our
but
third
we
poll.
really struggled to find, so basically the correct answer is that all of them. I was trying to find one that didn't apply, and I couldn't really, like, we really get plastics from just everywhere, a lot of places. So
And then our third poll, is it more expensive to switch from disposable plastics to reusables?
hmm.
Give folks just a few more seconds to participate. All right. So this one ranged from rarely, sometimes to usually, and we'll discuss that more in our presentation. And then finally, the last one is, which plastics should go into the recycling bin? Choose all that apply. Just giving folks another few seconds. Thanks to all those who have already participated. So looking at this, the majority of people chose number one, PET clear takeout container tops, and then the rest had a smattering of other votes as well. We will go more in depth into recycling of plastics later in our presentation. Thanks for your participation.
Although I will say that the only real thing that they want in the recycling bin is the first one, the number one PET clear takeout container tops. The rest, technically, with the numbers and all, they might be acceptable, but they're not, they really shouldn't go in. So anyway, with that, we'll move on. Thank you. So plastics are widespread and also wasteful. They're used in almost every industry. Production is energy and energy intensive. It's toxic chemical intensive. And the real crime is that most of it is created to be disposed of after minimal usage, particularly in food service. So why is it so problematic? Because they're man-made, created with fossil fuels and chemicals, and they're accumulating all over the planet, and they're in the bodies of virtually all animals and people everywhere, and they're in the environment everywhere. Because plastics don't biodegrade in the environment, they just break apart into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. There's really no plastic that goes away. It just is getting smaller and smaller into what we call microplastics and nanoplastics. And so therefore, when they get really small, they can enter the food chain and they can enter the water supplies. And so we get a human exposure from eating food and drinking water, and also just in the air. And the chemical additives in the plastics, but also in the environment, can also kind of bind to microplastics and bring them into our bodies. And they are associated with adverse health effects, including the increased risk of heart attack and stroke. And they're also polluting our water supplies and therefore getting into what we drink. Washing textiles, we're becoming more and more aware of all the synthetic fibers and washing those, and also flushing plastics, which include wet wipes. Those are not just made of paper, and same with feminine hygiene products. Those are also discharged into the water. So we have a couple definitions. Microplastics are all plastic particles less than 5 millimeters in size. So the picture there on the right is definitely microplastics. You can see them. Nanoplastics are just even smaller and smaller and smaller. They're much smaller than microplastics. Those are the ones that are mostly, getting into the food chain and in our bodies. But for simplicity, most people just refer to all of this as microplastics. And so our presentation will also just say microplastics, even though in a lot of cases it's the nanoplastics. So how much is in our bodies? So there's a study published a few years ago that found that the average person consumes about 886, I think that says, 83 tiny pieces of plastic, which is about 4 micrograms each day. Now, it's not all accumulating because some of it is excreting. You're excreting it as well when you use the restroom, but we don't really know how much is accumulating and how much is excreting. And there was another study just published recently this year that found that the amount of plastic in our brains has increased by 50% in the last less than 10 years, and that the brains of people with dementia had 3 to 5 times more plastic in them than those without dementia. So again, we're not sure about causality, but it was a fact that they noted. Plastics in the environment, there's 2 major sources. One, we have litter that's blown away during the collection process of our trash and recycling, or people just intentionally or accidentally leave it outside. But then we also have what I mentioned before, the microplastics that are going down the drain from laundering and from flushing of wet wipes and hygiene products. And the most common form of plastics in the environment are cigarette butt filters. Those are not, they're synthetic. And they're the most common type of plastic waste in the environment, followed closely by food packaging, beverage bottles, and grocery bags, the plastic bags. Microplastic impacts, again, they can be mistaken as food by wildlife. They can leach from the plastic and enter the soil and water sources. And again, the toxic chemicals can accumulate up the food chain. So in food service, your human exposure is from direct consumption of food that's containing the microplastics, drinking water that might be impacted by microplastics, and then also breathing in and consuming microplastic fibers that are shed by plastic containing textiles. So synthetic, polyester, nylon, those are all plastic. So where are they used in food service? We have the customer experience. So that's the things that the customer uses and sees. Also the internal operations back in the kitchen. And then we'll talk separately about the textiles. So customer experience, the dinnerware, the takeout containers, and the single-use packets of stuff. So nearly 95% of our food packaging goes to waste after, the container is opened and used, the food's used. The concerns with the plastic foodware are that the microplastics can transfer from the packaging to the food. Particularly high temperatures and longer durations of time can increase those amounts. So you really should never heat food in plastic containers. Always transfer it to glass or ceramic before you put it in the microwave. And then also try to avoid getting hot food in plastic. Also, much of the plastic foodware isn't recyclable. We'll talk about that later, or it just plain isn't recycled, even if it was recyclable. Improper disposal leads to litter and the microplastics that we've been talking about. And it's also just a waste of all the resources that went into making and transporting that material, because you're just throwing it out. So it's a huge contributor to climate change. So what's the solution? It's switching to reusables. So cost effective, it's almost always cost effective, and it often saves money. Here's just an example of a disposable cup. If it's costing 5 cents and a ceramic mug is costing $2, once you use that mug 40 times, it's paid for itself. And after that, it's a savings because you're not having to buy all those disposables anymore. And on top of that, there's an organization called Plastic Free Restaurants. If you're not already familiar with them, they will pay for some or all of the costs of buying reusables if those reusables are replacing single-use plastic. And that's really real. And it's not just for restaurants. Schools take advantage of that. So check out plasticfreerestaurants.org, I believe. The guide that we have has the link in it as well. So, the big elephant in the room is about washing the reusables. That's where the cost effectiveness and the savings, can be not always clear. Because there's a lot of side benefits to switching to reusables that you also need to factor in and can also be a savings of money. First, there's the improved appearance of your facility because a lot of disposals create a lot of litter. If you have less disposables, you'll have less trash to manage, which will save you money because it frees up your staff to do other things. It also improves the staff morale because they're not having to change a lot of trash and deal with a lot of trash. And it also reduces your disposal costs because your trash will have to get picked won't have to get picked up as often, and there won't be as much of it to pay for. There's also, if you do recycling or composting, you'll have decreased contamination of those. And then you also have an upgraded customer experience when they're using reusables. So that can increase their appreciation and their loyalty to your restaurant. So, but the transition to reusables, you have to consider, and again, this is where some money might come in, the collection method, how you're going to collect the reusables back in the dining area, the staffing that you might need to deal with the washing, the actual materials that you're going to purchase, but then again, the washing. So can you add the reusables to your current dishwashing protocol, whether you're just using a 3-sink method or you already have an automatic dishwasher, can putting the reusables through work with what your existing system and staffing are. Do you have space constraints, or can you install an automatic dishwasher? So, and there can be also some programs, grant programs that might help pay for a dishwasher if you think you could install one, because that is a big cost that, if you're a larger restaurant or you'll be in operation for a long period of time, the switching to reusables can save money over the course of time. But there would be the upfront cost of, installing the plumbing and and purchasing the dishwasher. So what can people do? They can choose reusable dining and serviceware and containers. When disposable is the only realistic option, try to use compostable fiber containers, but not the PLA plastic. The PLA plastic is, in theory, biodegradable or compostable, but unless you're sending your compostables to, a real industrial composter where they have a lot of heat and they really won't break down, and they're just almost as bad as regular plastic in the environment. They're not going to just break down out in the regular environment. So you want to look for BPI certified compostable products that are made from fiber. If you must use plastic, if you really have to use plastic, try to choose products to give your customers that are recyclable in your local system, which Stephanie will talk about more later, but generally that means they're made from number 1 or number 2 plastic, sometimes number 5. A new thing that is really, I'm noticing, becoming more prevalent is the clear clamshells that are made with number 6, which is polystyrene. Same thing as styrofoam, but just in a different form. And those really are not recyclable. So please never purchase number 6 plastics, even though I'm sure they're cheaper and that's why people are using them. You can encourage your patrons to bring their own reusable containers to manage their own leftovers. I know the state of Oregon passed a law so that if people bring their own containers, the people at the restaurant can actually do some of the managing of leftovers and things, but that's not generally the case. But you can have and this is when you go to a restaurant too, try to bring your own container and manage your own leftovers. Use sustainably produced paper or compostable bags instead of plastic bags. That's the law in some places, but if not, please try not to use plastic bags, and consider a reusable takeout container program. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So switching to reusable is not just for dine-in, but it can also be used for takeout. But when you're switching to compostables, just beware of PFAS, because some of that molded fiber products can have the chemical or the class of chemicals known as per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS. Some of you might be familiar with that. Now, this study is almost 10 years old now, so everybody's become more aware of PFAS, and fewer things have PFAS in them, but you can't be assured of that. So there are 3 places you can look to try to avoid purchasing items that contain PFAS. And the guide itself that we've produced has the links to all these, the Center for Environmental Health database and the Green Screen certified products and the BPI certified compostable products. So just going quickly through a case study, a dine-in restaurant that had most of their service was for people eating on site, but they originally used all disposable containers and utensils and individual salt, pepper, and sugar packets. And they switched all of that to reusables, and they had a payback period of just 2 months, mainly because they were able to fit washing of the reusables into their existing dishwashing protocol. So they didn't have to add more staff or purchase more equipment for that. So it was very quick payback period for not having to keep purchasing all that disposable stuff. Deposit return, this is at a university. A lot of universities have something similar to this now. It's the only way to take out any food from a dining hall is to use this EcoWare program. It's free for everybody. However, everybody is registered. You do have to have some registration of people and some ability to charge people if they don't return the containers. So basically containers have like a QR code on them, and so you can check them out and they know who they went to, and then you have to return the container to collection points on campus. And like I said, if they're not returned, then you get charged. But that is a common model now at a lot of universities, and also can be something that you could do at like a cafeteria like a corporate cafeteria. But there's also the possibility of collaborating with other locations to share. So you all purchase the same reusable takeout containers, and there's an app, and again, QR codes on the containers, and then the restaurants share. People can bring the container back to any of the restaurants that are participating, and then the restaurant that gets the container back washes it. And there might need to be some reconfiguring of the numbers of containers at the different restaurants. But this is something that's been happening in the greater Boston area. And then it's 4 restaurants in coastal New Hampshire partnered last year to implement a similar system. So that's definitely something that can happen, get some interested parties together. There's also the 10 Towns Toolkit. That's really geared mostly to schools, K-12 schools. It's a resource that was put together by actually some students, I believe, in New Hampshire, wanting to promote reusables and get away from plastics in their schools. And so they've got some case studies in there. So basically, the overall costs and the amount of waste generated both decrease when schools switch to reusable stainless steel utensils instead of disposables. And then also, basically, most of them use trays that have compartments on it, so that the tray is also the plate. So, but those are easy to use. And then the toolkit also encourages you to do fundraisers or try to get grants to support the cost of purchasing the reusables and a commercial dishwasher if you don't already have that. Or like I said, the plastic-free restaurants will help with the cost of purchasing reusables. And then another aspect, in addition to the containers, is single-use serviceware, which is, well, actually, I should go back because there's one other aspect that we didn't have a slide on is there's starting to be now some third-party dishwashing services. So it's like a central location that will wash reusable. So if your restaurant doesn't have the capability of washing internally, you can contract with the external dishwashing service. Those services are not available everywhere. They're starting to be available in larger cities that are maybe a little more progressive. Also, some college towns might have this third-party washing service where they will, it's also very applicable to schools because schools have a large volume, but where the third-party service will drop off the reusables one day and also at the same time be picking up the dirty ones, and then they wash the dirty ones and bring them back and pick up the other ones. So it's a service that can work that way. So single-use serviceware, again, this is a term we're using for disposable utensils, straws, stirrers, lids, condiment packets, and individually wrapped food like potato chips or butter pats, that sort of thing. So when most of this has no recycling market because of their irregular shape, their inconsistent plastic material, their flimsy nature, their contamination. And the US, we use a lot of disposable food service products each year. So the best thing that people can do is ask first. Don't just automatically give everybody ketchup. Personally, I do not like ketchup. I can't say that strongly enough. So I don't want any of those packets, and they're just going to end up wasted. So if you are not giving everybody everything, and a lot of times I have my own silverware. You know, I don't need that disposable stuff. I hate collecting more of that. I don't want it. So it would make me happy if I didn't get it. So you just limit it so you can have a station where it's where people can just choose what they want if they're there physically to pick stuff up, or if you have an online system, try to get it so people can actually just request if they want the salt and the pepper packet or the butter pat or whatever. In 2022, the state of Washington implemented a new law that requires that food service providers ask about single-use items and only provide what people want, and then also or provide a self-service counter. So that's particularly for dine-in and for counter service. So at the bulk and reusable station, you could have metal utensils. Obviously not for takeout, you don't want to give metal utensils, but you can have large condiment dispensers for ketchup and mustard and all those things. You can provide stainless steel or unlined paper sauce cups for people. You can have coffee creamer and milk in pitchers people pour from. You can have reusable food trays and baskets instead of plastic or paper. So you can swap out all your single-use stuff to bulk and reusables, and don't automatically provide the stuff with takeout and delivery orders. So with that, I don't know, Stephanie, if there are any questions. This is the point where we were going to switch over.
Yes, so we have first one comment that the 10 Towns Toolkit was not done by schools. Thank you, that is correct. It's just that it was done by the New Hampshire Network's Plastics Working Group, and school actions are just a part of the toolkit. We were just highlighting that portion because it most related to our project, but the toolkit is wider and does a lot of advocacy work as well regarding plastics. One question that we have is, do we have an example of organizations that may have grants for dishwashers?
Hmm. That is something that might be more state specific, or some communities might have, smaller programs. Uh, so I'm not aware of anything to point to in particular. And, the whole funding environment for a lot of a lot of these things is changing as well with this administration that we have nationally. That federal money goes to states, and then that means states have more money to give out for different things. So I can't give an example. Sorry.
Thank you, Jennifer. Another question we got is land application of sludge also a source of microplastics?
It certainly could be. Same with composting. When you're composting, I know it's a big issue with depackaging. When a grocery store has leftover food, it's all often packaged, and then they depackage them to be able to recover the food, and then you end up with all the packaging. But some of the plastic, smaller pieces, might end up in the compost. So yes, it is an issue. I know the state of Vermont was looking into microplastics in sludge and compost.
Hmm. And then the last question, oh, another one came in, but the second to last question that we got is the idea that a paper cup of takeout for ketchup is better than a plastic packet of ketchup?
So I would say yes, because my frame of reference, or the way I like to think about things, is what if this container ends up in the environment? It ends up as litter. It ends up by accident or on purpose. It's in the environment. What is going to happen to it? So, if you're just measuring greenhouse gas emissions or something from making it, sometimes plastic looks like it's better. It's lighter weight, it might be better, but I want to think about the toxics and what happens if it's in the environment.
Thank you, Jennifer. And since we do have a couple extra minutes here before my part, we do have an extra question that came in. So this is now the second to last. What is the best way to incentivize local businesses, including restaurants, takeout places, coffee shops, etc., to switch to reusables if there's no local ordinance or state law requiring that action?
Hmm. I think general promoting awareness of, I don't like the thought of having plastic in my brain, like trying to make people, it's an educational process to make people more aware of the issues with plastic, and then that there are alternatives, and that they aren't always more expensive. Yes, it's a change. If you're used to just disposables and dealing with all that trash and all that litter, then the thought of having to now wash things might, put you off. But I think if people are more educated, but I'm not sure about laws or policies. Obviously, helping people to, if you had the resources to help people pay for buying a dishwasher, that could help.
Mhm. Yeah, I would second the point that one of the best incentives is the potential for financial savings. It's a business transaction at that point. So working towards switching to reusables and decreasing business expenses both benefits the environment and the business. So making that point and encouraging the switch, even though it will take a little time probably to get used to that switch and to iron out all wrinkles that come along with creating change in a business. Overall, I think there will be more benefits than disadvantages to doing so. And then finally, our last question is there any movement in changing health codes preventing people from bringing external food containers into restaurants?
Well, like I said, the state of Oregon worked hard on that and did pass some legislation to enable that. I was on a webinar a few weeks ago where that was discussed. So I can try to find that to give as a model. But it is, especially in the Northeast here, things are done locally. So it really would be talking with your health association. I mean, it trickles down from, national to state. A lot of people just adopt by reference or the wording of the next higher organization. So sometimes the local health department would be reluctant to do something on their own. So I'm not sure what's happening locally here in the Northeast.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, continuing on to internal operations. So this includes products such as considering it food purchase, storage, handling, any aspect of the food in the kitchen before it goes out to the customer. Will you go to the next slide, please?
Oh, I forgot. I needed to do that. Sorry about that, Stephanie.
So food purchasing and handling, a lot of food handling requires plastic items such as single-use gloves for sanitation, but there are opportunities for plastic reduction when purchasing and storing food. So we can consider aspects such as supplier food packaging, prepared food storage, and the wasted food. At the end of the day, how can we evaluate that to make change and reduce how much food we're wasting and thus the packaging that was required for that process? So first, food packaging from suppliers. So we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions regarding this packaging, such as what does come in plastic packaging, what purchased items can be purchased in bulk to reduce packaging, does the supplier have reusable crates that can be returned after deliveries to make another reduction in packaging? For foods that must be packaged in plastics, can the plastic be recyclable in the local system, or is there an option for compostable packaging to further reduce our packaging burden? And if the plastic packaging is unavoidable with the current supplier, is there a different supplier that could achieve a smaller plastic footprint and better support the business in making changes to food packaging? So food packaging during and after preparation. After the food is received, let's think about how the food is stored while we're preparing and afterwards. So what containers are we storing the food in? How is it sealed? Are we using plastic wrap? If food can be stored in glass or stainless steel containers with silicone lids, not only does that reduce the amount of packaging required for storing food, but it also puts the food into containers that don't leach microplastics into the food, so reducing the amount of microplastics entering the food that we eat. And if we are able to compost, can the single-use plastic gloves be replaced by BPI certified compostable gloves? BPI certified is a metric that is clean compostable items, so it reduces the amount of known chemicals in that product. And then finally, evaluation of wasted food. So wasted food, while itself may not be in plastic, the plastic that was used prior to the wasted food, such as receiving the food and working with the food and storing the food adds up. So the fewer food handling items that we use, including single-use gloves, plastic wrap, and containers. Like I said, they add up as we waste that food. So reducing that food helps reduce those plastic items. Not only does it reduce the plastic, but it saves money in terms of lower food purchase prices and waste management costs. And it also saves money in the form of utilities, using less water, gas, and staffing resources as well to manage that food. So what we can do for internal operations is review the food packaging from suppliers, like I've been talking about, purchasing items in bulk if it won't lead to food waste, using containers that can be taken back from the supplier, and also choosing containers that are recyclable, compostable, or even better, using non-plastic reusable containers. We can also choose compostable food service sanitation items such as gloves that are BPI certified. And then we can also use containers. We can wrap containers with silicone lids, which can also be dishwashed and used in place of plastic wrap. So next, let's understand plastics recycling. A recycling symbol does not equal recyclable. A lot of plastics have no feasible recycling market and should not go in the recycling bins. Recycling in food service is a great way to reduce the amount of items that are going into the waste stream or into the landfill stream. So let's recycle as many plastics as possible and ensure that the recycling is rinsed and correctly sorted. When we can, let's only provide customers with packaging and takeout containers that are recyclable in the local system when using plastic. Some food service plastic types that are generally recyclable include type 1 polyethylene tetraphthalate, PET or PET. This includes disposable water bottles, a lot of food packaging such as peanut butter bottles, oil or dressing containers, as well as some other takeout food containers. As Jennifer was saying, if we choose to use plastic clear clamshells when purchasing, please make sure that they are type 1 plastic instead of type 6 plastic. That is becoming more common. Type 6 plastic, as Jennifer mentioned, and we'll see it on the next slide, is polystyrene, which is not recyclable. So focusing on type 1 plastic, that is the most recyclable plastic, is preferred. And then we have type 2 plastic, high density polyethylene, which includes food packaging such as plastic milk containers and then some cleaning product containers. These are highly recyclable in most systems. And then the other plastic that is often recyclable is type 5 polypropylene. This can be some takeout containers, food packaging such as yogurt cups, and then cloudy plastic containers that include some baby products. So these are the three most recyclable plastics. So if you do choose to use plastics, focusing on purchasing items that utilize these for packaging is preferred. And then recyclability of other plastics. Type 4 low density polyethylene. Um, these include thin film plastic store or takeout bags, food packaging such as bread bags or cling film, trash bags, 6-pack rings, anything that you can put your finger through and it stretches is type 4. This should not be put in the regular recycling collection bins. It can cause issues at recycling facilities, such as getting trapped in the machine. If you can collect it yourself, this can be recycled at many grocery stores and big box stores. So it does have a market, it just has to be specially handled. So it should not go in the bin. And then 3 types that are never really recyclable include type 3 polyvinyl chloride, type 6 polystyrene, even when it looks like a clear clamshell or another type of clear plastic. And then type 7 mixed, because it's really hard to use plastic again once it's already been mixed with another type. So some purchasing considerations that I mentioned while talking about recycling, but we'll highlight here is beware of number 6 clamshells. Number 6 plastic is becoming more common, but it is not recyclable. So avoiding that and purchasing type 1 is best. Please avoid black plastic. Black plastic is difficult for sorting technology to detect, so it often becomes trash. And then only purchase recyclable plastic in your system. Often number 1, number 2, or number 5 plastics are commonly recyclable. And even if it is an option, please consider BPI compostable items or reusable. So our next section is textiles, which includes products such as uniforms, tablecloths, napkins, carpets, and upholstered furniture. So some of it can be regularly washed, others are built into the space. So textiles and food service establishments, many fabrics contain synthetic fibers such as polyester, nylon, rayon, acrylic, and spandex. These synthetic fibers are made up of plastics and can discharge microplastics and other chemicals into the water when they are washed. So the best way that we can avoid releasing additional microplastics and PFAS into the environment is to opt out of these types of fabrics and choose untreated natural fabrics. So when are PFAS in textiles? As Jennifer mentioned, PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They are frequently called forever chemicals because they don't break down and they do build up over time in the environment. They also build up in our bodies and animals' bodies. They are associated with many numerous negative health effects. If you're interested in learning more, Jennifer and I did another USDA project focused on PFAS related to consumer products and in food service previously. So go to our website, numoa.com, to learn more. And then PFAS are often considered proprietary ingredients, so they're not disclosed by managers in these products, which makes it difficult to determine what fabrics are treated, what are not, and what physical items also contain PFAS. Many fabrics are treated with PFAS to achieve water and stain resistant properties and sometimes oil resistant properties. And then they are often, when they're washed, these PFAS release into the water and have the same issues that microplastics do. So what can we do? First, don't buy any type of textile, uniform, tablecloth, napkins, carpets, and other textiles that are made out of synthetic fibers. We can choose untreated natural fabrics such as cotton, hemp, wool, or linen, and we can avoid fabrics that are labeled specifically with the water, stain, or oil resistance because these are likely treated with toxic chemicals in addition to containing plastic. Some other ways we can avoid textiles and both plastics and PFAS are to choose wood furniture and cushions that are made from natural fabrics instead of upholstered furniture. Not only does it make it easier to clean, but like I said, it reduces that toxic load. And then we can consider replacing all plastic containing textiles with those natural untreated options. We can consider wood or tile flooring instead of carpet, either when building or renovating or doing a refresh. While it is more expensive, it does tend to last longer if properly upkept as well. So again, considering that upfront cost that's required with the overtime savings benefits, similar to reusable items. One thing to note is that wool is naturally water and stain resistant, or it contains those properties, but it can be more expensive if choosing, say, wool carpets or some other type of wool items. So something to keep in mind of those natural properties, but also the cost aspect of wool. And then when possible, try and spot treat carpets and upholstered furniture with plain soap and water rather than chemicals or doing a full cleaning, or you can use natural stain removal remedies such as baking soda, just trying to reduce, again, those chemicals that are entering the water stream either through complete washing of the item or harsh chemicals to try and remove stains. So with this project, we had a few publications. First, which this webinar is mostly based off of, is our Plastics and Food Service Guide. This is an 8-page guide that discusses in more detail everything that we've talked about today, including why plastics are harmful, and then going more in depth about the customer experience, internal operations, and textiles. And then our fact sheets, we have 3 topics of that are covered on 5 fact sheets to provide guidance, recycling guidance to our targeted communities. So our first one, the problem with plastic, discusses why we care about reducing plastic use. The second, which has 3 iterations, is our plastic recycling's do's and don'ts. So we have one that is more focused generally on many communities, and then 2 targeted communities for the communities that we worked with on this project. First, the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District, and then secondly, the Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments. And then lastly, we have a plastics reduce and reuse, focusing on saving money and the planet, and just discussing storage of items and how to reduce plastic use. And then we're going to do some after poll questions. Or should I do, I'll do questions first if there were any.
There are not any that are typed in yet, but people please type in some questions. And I will just say about the recycling, while technically some things are recyclable, they don't necessarily have enough of a market that they are, can be put into the recycling system, and they just end up becoming trash. That's like the number 6 clear plastic. In theory, it could be recyclable, but it's not acceptable and people don't want it. Same with the black plastic. In theory, it's recyclable, but it's really not wanted in most collection systems. So okay, so I'm going to launch the after this. It's the same set of questions. So we're trying to measure. Let's see. I think it's open, right? So
Yes.
please vote. I hope we're going to try to measure the whether there's a difference in learning. So what are the problems? Why are plastics a problem? Choose all that are applicable, and we'll just let some more people choose here, hopefully. Get up to a decent percentage of people voting. Let's get a couple more people to vote. Couple more. Let's get up over 75% of the people. All right, well, in the interest of time, although this webinar is taking less time than I think we had anticipated. So let's see, anybody else gonna vote? No. Okay, I'll close that. And I guess I can share the results. So we have most people voting for the 4 options that are clearly why they're problems, and then they really aren't inert. So that one's really not the correct answer. All right, I'll hide that, and we will choose the next question. Where do plastics in our bodies come from? Choose all that apply. And we'll just, again, hopefully get the majority of people voting. And not every water supply has microplastics in it, but it is a route, like I can say. So some of these aren't applicable 100% of the time, but okay. Another little bit of another couple people. No. Okay. We have people, a high percentage voting for all of them, which is good. Yeah, I don't personally chew on plastic pens, but some people do, and that would certainly be a route if you did do that. Okay, the next one. Is it more expensive to switch from disposables? Choose one. Okay, we have more people voting this time, so I'm going to close it earlier. And is it more expensive to switch from disposables to reusables? And we were thinking that we would take both sometimes and rarely are probably the two that are most applicable to the experience of, all the different things you can find online and the case studies that people point to. It's sometimes more expensive, but usually it's rarely more expensive. All right, the last one, almost done. Which plastic should go in the recycling bin? Vote for all that apply. So yeah, the key term here is should go in the recycling bin. We can get a few more people to vote. All right. Share the results. So everybody that voted picked the number one, clear plastic takeout containers. Those are kind of wanted, quote unquote, in the recycling stream, and the rest of them really aren't. So even though in theory a lot of places say, put 1 through 7, if it's labeled, you can put it in. But they don't really want a lot of these things. The only number one, the clear or the light colored, the colored clear, number one, that's not black. Number 2 and number 5 are really what they want. And number 4 is definitely recyclable, which is the thin, stretch plastics, but those you cannot put in the regular recycling bin. They contaminate. They gum up the machinery at the recycling centers, and they're not wanted. But if you collect them separately, they definitely do have a market. And that's why most grocery stores and big box stores have containers to collect them. And they're usually sent to the Trex, the people that make sort of non-wood decking and furniture and those things. Okay, so a whole bunch of people now have put in questions, and if plastic is a component in automotive tires, do you know if this contributes a lot of micro and nanoplastics to the environment as tires wear down? So that is yes. So, I never really thought before, oh, why do you have to buy new tires? Because the old ones are getting worn. Well, where is all that worn going? Now, the big problem is I can't remember the chemical name, but there's in tires, is a chemical that's used so that the UV light, the sun, doesn't break down the rubber, the synthetic rubber as much, and that chemical can really pollute waterways and has led to fish kills in some places. So yes, tires are a huge problem and source of plastics in the environment. Okay, let's see. I work with schools, and one resounding reason schools don't go back to reusables is the lack of staffing. Do you have suggestions for addressing this issue? So, a couple things. One would be if you can involve teachers and or students and or parents that really care about the issue, that might be an avenue. And the other one to look into is this third-party washing service. I know there's a couple schools. There is now a third-party washing service in the Boston area. I know that doesn't help in rural areas, but in the Boston area, and there's a couple of school districts now that are utilizing that service. So again, they're dropping off every day in the afternoon the clean stuff for the next day, and they're taking the dirty away. And so, that service obviously costs money, but again, you're not constantly purchasing the disposables, and you're not having to deal with all that trash. So, I'm not sure if the cost comes out equal or that whether there's a savings, but I don't think if it's more expensive, it's not going to be that much more expensive. I know there was a school district that was using like almost a million styrofoam trays every day. Every year, and now, now they're not doing that. So they don't have to purchase all that. They're not throwing all that away. So somebody's commenting that it's true that some plastics aren't cut out for recycling, but it's probably better to have them in the recycling stream than the waste stream because the residuals at a recycling facility are easier to analyze. And okay, this is really a long one. An EPR for packaging will and yes, so some states, like the state of Maine, has passed extended producer responsibility for packaging. So if all this bad stuff is in the recycling stream, it's going to create problems for the recycling facilities, and then that will be a feedback loop into the manufacturers that are having to pay for the extended producer responsibility for packaging. So that is, that's an interesting way to think about it. So I guess if once the EPR is actually in force and is happening, so it's all under development now in different states, and I'm not sure when Maine will actually be happening, but that is something that could be a factor, perhaps, to just put all the plastic junk into the recycling. I'm not sure. I don't know, Stephanie, if you have any thoughts on that.
That's a tough one.
Hmm.
Not off the top of my head, but we can explore that.
Okay, do you have any resources for case studies involving savings for schools switching to reusables? So the guide that we published does have, and our website does have additional resources, and also, the references that we are using to make some of these statements um, are are available on the NMOA website, on the project page and where the publications are. So there are some case studies. The 10 Towns Toolkit has a few. Um, uh, the quantifying of the numbers is harder to find. People talk a lot about the environmental benefits and the process and how well it all is working, but getting down to the actual financial numbers is harder to pull that information out. Do have resources posted on our website. Okay. So I don't think anybody gets upset when things end early. Do we have any more questions? Any more comments? Anything else we should share, Stephanie?
Do you want to go to the last slide with our emails on it?
Oh, sure.
Yes, so if you have any questions after this webinar or want to follow up, please email myself and Jennifer, and we will happily talk about more things related to plastics. The only other thing I can think of, Jennifer, is if you want to share our website where all the resources are so they can see the project page and the resources.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to pause sharing for a minute while I get that. So I'll pause it on that slide, I think. Yes, and we will send out an email to everybody as well to show with the link. Once we get the presentation posted and the slides posted, we'll show link, and let's see our website. Okay, I can show the NMOA website here. And this is our basic website. And then we have, if you go, well, let's see, what's the best way to show people, Stephanie? Go to the project. Maybe I'll start with the project page.
Yeah,
So
let's start
here,
with the project. So
materials
materials
management,
management.
projects, scroll down. Here's one. Here's this project. Then we have the links to all of our documents here. And then we also have the view, the 5 plastic, well, we'll have to change the terms here. And then here's where we have the webinar will be posted. And then we have the guide here, the fact sheets are all here. And then if you keep scrolling, this is the problem that you have to remember, keep scrolling. Here's studies and additional resources. So here's some of the studies where we got about how much is in our brains, or that study, that heat releases more plastics into the food. Here's the 10 Towns Toolkit and some of that stuff. So that's where you can find this stuff. And then the last place that you'll also be able to find this is in the events. This will become a past event, but because it's still today. this page will also have a PDF of the presentation, and the recording of the webinar will be here. And the way you would find this, well, we'll link it to the project page, but also this little back button. So our website is very forward focused. So it's showing things that are happening in the future. That's the way it defaults. And we've got nothing happening for almost a year now. I mean, we will have certain things pop up, but as of now, we just have nothing. But if you go to the past, then we have a lot of different things. So, and this one goes the other way. So this is the least recent of these 12. I think it does 12 at a time. You can keep going back and find even more old things, but and then you'll go down to the bottom, and then the most recent webinar, most recent event, which would be this, would be down here. So so let's see, anything else? Anybody else have some experience that they would like to share? All right, well, you'll have an extra 15 minutes back in your day. And thank you, everybody that joined us. And I hope you found this was useful. Please send any feedback that you have, and we will let you know when the webinar materials are posted, and that will also give you links to where the other stuff is. All righty. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.